We have two kinds of socks. We have the khuf, and then we have the jawrab. There's no dispute that you can wipe over the khuf, socks made from leather or skin. But what about the jawrab? What if you have cotton socks? What if you have socks made from other materials? Can you wipe over these socks? In wudu, wiping over the socks instead of washing the feet is permissible by ijma', by consensus of all of our jurists, all of our fuqaha. So they've all agreed that it's permissible to wipe over the socks instead of washing your feet. Now there are conditions in order to do this, but in general it's something that everyone agrees on. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he says, لَيْسَ فِي قَلْبِي مِنَ الْمَسْحِ شَيْءٍ. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he said that I don't have anything in my heart against wiping over the socks. He says, فِيهِ أَرْبَعُونَ حَدِيثًا عَنِ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said that there have been 40 hadiths narrated from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم on the topic of wiping over the socks. Now, the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they refer to a specific kind of sock called the khuf. Now, the khuf is socks that was made from animal skin, from leather. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have the ahadith mentioning that he wiped over the khuf or the khifaf. There's also a hadith that's been narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wiped over a muq. It is a khuf, but it's a short version of a khuf. The scholars do have different opinions about wiping over socks that are made from other materials. Now, what's the Arabic word for socks made from other materials? Well, the Arabic word is jawrab. So we have two kinds of socks. We have the khuf, and then we have the jawrab. Now, there's no dispute that you can wipe over the khuf. But what about the jawrab? What if you have cotton socks? What if you have socks made from other materials? Can you wipe over these socks? Well, the vast majority of the early Muslims, we're talking about the companions and their students, so on and so forth. In the early generations, the vast majority of these scholars agreed that it is permissible to wipe over other kinds of socks. Meaning just because one kind of sock was popular during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, doesn't mean that when we invent new kinds of socks that somehow now it's impermissible, it's haram, it's invalid to wipe over those socks in wudu. This is the position of the Hanbali madhab. This is the position of the Shafi'i madhab. This is the position of the Zahiriyya. And among the Hanafi scholars, this is the position of Abu Yusuf. It's the position of Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. And this position has also been narrated from Abu Hanifa rahimahullah himself when he became sick, that he finally chose this opinion as opposed to another opinion previously. So there is some dispute among the fuqaha, but these are the scholars who allow you to wipe over socks made from other materials. Now, the opinion that allows wiping over these kinds of socks is also the opinion of many of the companions, as we'll mention in a bit. And there are some scholars who do require that the socks that you wipe over be made from skin. But why is the view, which is the majority view, that you can wipe over other kinds of socks and not just cotton socks, why is this the stronger opinion? Well, if we look at the illah or the reasoning behind why the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ allowed to wipe over leather socks, the illah, the reason is to make things easy for the ummah. And because this is what was worn on the feet, and it's because it is what covers the feet. Now, applying this reasoning, we find that this reason is also present in other kinds of socks and not just cotton socks. And there's a famous fiqh principle, according to Islamic rulings, that the fuqaha, the jurists, use to derive rulings. And that principle is that al-hukmu yaduru ma'a illatihi wujudan wa adama. That a ruling revolves around its reason. So whenever there's a reason for a ruling existing in one place, if something else has that same reason, then the same ruling should be applied there as well. So, for example, if the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ forbade doing something because it is harming someone, right? Then therefore, if something else causes harm, even though that thing is not something that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentioned, it's still going to be haram. It's going to have the same ruling. Why? Because it also causes harm. This mechanism is called Qiyās. Qiyās is to make an analogy. That if something is given a ruling by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for a particular reason, if that reason is found in something else, it should take the exact same ruling. So here, applying this principle here, applying Qiyās, applying analogy here, we find that the same reason for which it is allowed to wipe over cotton socks, we find that the same reason is present in other forms of socks as well. And what you actually find is that there's a hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud, the hadith of Thawban radiallahu anhu. He said that the Prophet ﷺ, he sent out a military detachment. And the Prophet ﷺ, as Thawban said, he says, أمرهم أن يمسحوا على العصائب يعني العمائم والتساخين يعني الخفاف. Thawban radiallahu anhu, he said the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he sent out this group of soldiers, he told them to wipe over the asa'ib, and he told them to wipe over the tasakhin. Asa'ib means that which is wrapped over the head. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, he means by this the turbans. The Arabs would wear this head cover to protect them from sand, as well as the sun and the elements in general. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling them that when you make wudu, to wipe over the turbans. And wiping over the turbans has rulings that maybe you guys might want to ask in case you have any confusion about. We could talk about it in a future video, inshallah. But the Prophet ﷺ told them to wipe over the asa'ib, over the head coverings, the turbans. What tasakhin and the tasakhin. Now, what does tasakhin mean? Well, if you look at the translations of this hadith, you'll find that it's translated as socks. But tasakhin has a specific meaning. And when you know the specific meaning of tasakhin, then you understand the point of wiping over the socks and what is considered a sock according to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, he told them to wipe over the tasakhin. Things that are considered tasakhin are كل ما يسخن القدم, right? كل ما يسخن الرجل. Things that are considered tasakhin are that which insulate the feet. So, according to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that which should be wiped over is anything that insulates the feet. It protects the feet. It might provide a level of warmth, but it insulates the feet. So here in this hadith, we find the Prophet ﷺ, he's acknowledging that what should be wiped over are the tasakhin. So here is a very important hadith. Why is it so important? Because it shows that the haqiqa shar'iyya, that what the religion considers you to wipe over is anything that covers the feet and insulates the feet. Now, what we find is that the opinion that you could wipe over other kinds of socks and not just cotton socks, this was actually the opinion of many of the companions. Ibn al-Mundhir, one of the early jurists, one of the early fuqaha, he stated that it was narrated from 9 of the companions that it is valid, that it's okay to wipe over other kinds of socks. He states that it was narrated from Ali radiallahu anhu, from Ammar ibn Yasir, from Abu Mas'ud, from Anas ibn Malik, from Ibn Umar, from Al-Bara ibn Azib, from Bilal, from Abu Umama, as well as Sahl ibn Sa'd. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentions that Abu Dawud, one of the early scholars of hadith, he also narrates this from other companions as well. He narrates this from Ibn Abbas, he narrates this from Umar ibn al-Khattab, and a couple other companions as well. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he said that this was narrated from 13 of the companions. And Ibn Qudama rahimahullah, another one of the early scholars of fiqh, one of the early jurists, he states that as-sahaba radiallahu anhum masahu ala al-jawarib. He said the companions, they wiped over other kinds of socks, meaning not just cotton socks, but other kinds of socks. He then says, وَلَمْ يَظْهَرُ لَهُمْ مُخَالِفٌ فِي عَصْرِهِمْ فَكَانَ إِجْمَاعًا. He says there was no one who went against their opinion in their generation, during their time. So it was a matter of consensus among them. So some scholars, as Ibn Qudama, as we just read his statement, as he does, and other scholars as well, like Ibn Hazm, they state that this is a matter of ijma', a matter of consensus among the companions, that you could wipe over other kinds of socks. So when we find an opinion that is the opinion of the vast majority of scholars, when we find that it is the opinion of the companions and we don't know anyone who went against it among the companions, all of these are indicators that this is the correct opinion, especially when the Prophet ﷺ, he told the companions to wipe over the tasakhin, that which insulate and cover and give a level of warmth to the feet. So in summary, the kind of socks that you can wipe over are socks that are considered socks. It doesn't matter what the material is, you can wipe over any kinds of socks, whether it's wool, whether it's cotton, whether it's any other kind of sock that human beings are going to invent until the Day of Judgment, as long as it fits the description that the Prophet ﷺ gave them, and that is that which insulates and covers the feet. So it's permissible to wipe over all kinds of socks. However, I do want to mention a couple other conditions that are important to keep in mind when wiping over socks in wudu. Maybe some of you guys might be new Muslims. Maybe this is a new concept. Maybe you don't know how to wipe over the socks. When you wipe over the socks, there are several conditions that you have to make sure you are abiding by. So if you're going to wipe over the socks, you have to make sure that you put the socks on during the previous wudu, and that was a complete wudu. Once you've made that wudu, you can put the socks on. Then when you break your wudu again, the next time that you're making wudu, you can then wipe over the socks. This is the correct scenario. I'll give you an example of the incorrect scenario. Let's say, for example, you broke your wudu. You don't have socks on, right? You broke your wudu. And you're not in a state of complete wudu. And then you put on the socks. And then you want to make a wudu. This is not valid. You cannot wipe over the socks then. So the first condition that I want to add, in addition to you wiping over any kind of socks, is to make sure that when you put the socks on, you put the socks on in a state of complete wudu, whereby you washed your feet. Then you put on the socks. Then when you break the wudu again, then you can wipe over the socks the next time you make wudu. Also, it's also important to mention another condition, and that is that when you wipe over the socks, you have a time period to wipe over the socks. If you are a resident, you have 24 hours to wipe over the socks. Now, the 24-hour clock starts when you make your first wipe. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you made wudu at 5 p.m. in which you washed your feet. Then at 5:30, you put on socks. You still have wudu. Then as soon as you put on the socks, you break your wudu. And at 6 p.m., you now make a new wudu in which you wipe over the socks. You have until 6 p.m. the following day to continue to wipe over your socks in each subsequent wudu until 6 p.m. the following day. So you have 24 hours. Once 6 p.m. comes the following day, you cannot continue to wipe over those socks. But if you are a traveler, the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed travelers to wipe over their socks for 3 days, meaning you have 72 hours if you're traveling. This means where you're actually going on a journey. You leave your land. It's something that's considered a journey. And another condition that's really important as well is that the socks should cover the vast majority of the foot. If you have holes in the sock, this is not something that will nullify your ability to wipe over those socks. But just make sure that your socks cover the entirety of the foot past the ankles. This is the safest thing to do. There is some scholarly discussion concerning this, but just make sure that it covers the vast majority of the foot up into the ankles. And another condition that's important to remember as well is that you can only wipe over the socks in wudu, not in ghusl. So if you're going to need to take a bath, let's say a man was intimate with his wife, and then he needs to make ghusl. If he has on socks, he has to take off those socks. This is a quick summary of some of the conditions. I thought it was important to mention this for you guys, just so that you're wiping over the socks in a correct way. I ask Allah that He make us among those who make the wudu correctly. And inshallah, I hope this answered your question. And if you guys have any other questions, be sure to include it in the comment section and we will address it in an upcoming video, inshallah.